Okay, so in this video, we're going to go over the thalamus. There's a lot of stuff here. I know it looks really bad, but whatever, something we can do. When I learned it, I thought the same thing. I was like, this has to be a joke. Like, this has to be an actual joke. There cannot be this much stuff in this little structure. First, before we even start the video, I just want to make it clear what the thalamus even is. It's giving me this little peace sign that I drew. We spoke about it in other videos that we have different tracts and different functions that come up through our spinal cord, through our pons, through our medulla, up through the brainstem, right? And they finish or they target the thalamus. The last video we just covered was the basal ganglia. And the basal ganglia did what? Had a direct tract and an indirect tract, and both of those guys targeted the anterior lateral parts of the thalamus, which we're going to talk about again in the video. Just bear with me and we'll be fine. I'm going to start it off by showing the anatomy of kind of our brainstem and the brain with the diencephalon, just so we have a good visual before we dive into each of all these tracts, and then we'll be good. Okay, so let's start. I know you guys noticed this thing. You're like, oh, I'm getting fancy. A little bit. Kind of made this little board, a movable board, to help us out, but it's besides the point. Here we go. So this area right here, I know it looks like the actual cerebrum, the brain with the different lobes. It's not. It's going to be the diencephalon mainly. The brainstem comes up, right? He goes to the midbrain, and then he finishes when the diencephalon, where the thalamus is, hypothalamus, pineal gland, epithalamus, etc. I'm going to go over it real quick, or right now. Let's get a good visual. Here's the brainstem, right? And then this is where that area comes from. This region over here, this is going to be the prefrontal cortex, but this is going to be our frontal lobe, right? This is what the frontal lobe would be. Up here would be the parietal lobe. Back here is going to be the occipital lobe. And then covering this region is the temporal lobe. So how can I explain what it looks like? Kind of if here's the brain, right? You take the brain and you break it in half. Just break it in half right down the middle. And now you're looking at the inside of it. This is half of the brain, this is the other half of the brain put together. Break it in half, and you're looking in it. So if you look in it, this inside portion, there's going to be a left side and a right side, but when they fuse together, they're going to form this structure. And this is where we're looking at, right here. Okay, so what am I saying? Now, when I draw the pictures on the board, I'm going to either draw it like this, or like this. If I draw it like this, the top region, it's mainly because most of the tracts and the functions are coming from separate areas of the thalamus, and then they're going to different regions. If I draw it like this, it means we're getting our functions and our fibers from the spinal cord upward. That's why I'm going to draw it like this. Now, before I talk about this structure, let's talk about him real quick. We know we start off in the spinal cord, right? And in the spinal cord, we have structures, or the cross-section of the other spinal cord. Looks like this guy. We got the white matters, right? The posterior great horn, anterior great horn, etc. The different tracts travel up through it. Now, what else do we have? In this region is the first region we've covered, was the medulla, medulla oblongata. The next region was the pons. You ascend upwards, we have the midbrain. Now, after the midbrain, we're going to go into this huge structure, right? In this structure, the main one we're focusing on in this video is the thalamus. There's obviously one on the left, well, one on the right and one on the left. What else do we have? The thalamus is broken up into three different regions. I'm sorry, that's why it looks like a peace sign. And then this whole entire thalamus has so many different structures. What are the structures? We're going to get to it right in a minute. Okay, so now if we proceed up, right, just redo it real quick. Spinal cord, medulla oblongata, pons, midbrain, literally coincides. This is just a blown up portion of it. Now, if we remember, behind the midbrain and the pons and the medulla, what did we have? I'm going to draw it as a dashed line. What is this? The cerebellum, correct? So now, the cerebellum, he's behind it all. Okay, it's not too bad. Now, we're going to start from the thalamus, and we're going to work our way around him. What does this mean? Okay, so the diencephalon, right? This structure or this set of structures, I should say, combine to make up the diencephalon. Now, what are these structures? So, you start from the thalamus, and you're going to move. And each name of these structures come from the orientation of the thalamus. Okay, so the thalamus is right down Broadway, right? Right in the middle. Okay, so now, to start, if we talk about a structure that is posterior to it, so what does that mean? Behind it, right? This is going to be known as the epithalamus. Okay, so epithalamus is for behind it. And the structure that's in the epithalamus, or like composed of it, is the pineal gland. Remember that. We're not going to talk about that in this video. I just want to give a quick orientation. Now, a structure that is below the thalamus is going to be the subthalamus. Okay, that makes sense. Subthalamus. Not bad. Now, the structure that's below the subthalamus is going to be the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus. So we're going to have the hypothalamus, subthalamus, thalamus, and epithalamus. Those are the four main structures that make up this diencephalon. Now, there's a couple other structures I want to mention real quick because they contribute to like our discussion on the thalamus. Okay, we're going to have this brown region right here. Is going to be known as the mammillary bodies. This region right here is going to be known as the pituitary gland. This red region is the cingulate gyrus. Cingulate gyrus. Below him is going to be the corpus callosum. Now, we're going to have a couple other structures real quick. We have the entorhinal cortex. We're going to get to him. The hippocampus is used for memory consolidation. The olfactory cortex. And then if you see, okay, the amygdala, And then if you see this structure coming around this whole entire region, right, from the hippocampus all the way around the hypothalamus, through the pituitary gland to the mammillary bodies, this is going to be known as the fornix. We'll get to it though. Okay, so now we know the anatomy of this guy, right? What did I say? Here we go, right? The thalamus is right here. The thalamus right here, right? Same exact thing. This is just a view of both sides, the left and the right side. This is just a view of one section. Fine. Now, the thalamus, this region, is going to have three different structures. It's going to be composed of three different things. What are they? So I'm going to take this structure, right, and I'm just going to blow him up. It's going to be blown up. So if we move him, here's that blown up structure. Same exact thing. Blown up structure, this is the thalamus. Okay. You're going to have a couple parts. You're going to have let's do the orientation of it first. This is the anterior, this is the lateral, this is medial, and this is posterior. Fine. Now, the anterior part is just going to have one thing in it. What's it going to have? It's going to have the anterior lateral nucleus. Okay, that's all it is. Now, I should have mentioned it. What makes the peace sign, right? What makes it? This purple region, this is known as the internal medullary lamina. Okay, not bad. The internal medullary lamina, right, has a couple things in it. He separates mainly the three different regions of the thalamus, but the structures he has in it is known as the Centromedial Nucleus. That's the main one we want to talk about. So now, where am I even going at this? So, I should have mentioned, I didn't, but the thalamus, right, these three different regions are going to be composed of three different actions. What are the actions? So we're going to have a limbic system. So we're going to need structures for the limbic system. The limbic system is for like fear, emotion, sexual behavior, feeding, learning, etc. Now, that's going to be one region. The next region we're going to have is for the sensory nucleus. So for sensory control or sensory innervation. And the third region is going to be for what? Motor control. Okay, so here we go. Let's start off with the limbic system. Limbic system, right? We talked about the peace sign, right? It separates into three different regions. Now, for the limbic system, it's going to take up a lot of the thalamus, right? Because what did we say? It's got a lot of different functions. Okay, here we go. We have the internal medullary lamina, splits it down into three different sections. And the first area in the limbic system is going to be the anterior lateral nucleus. Okay, not bad. We're going to talk about him. The next region in the limbic system is going to be the medial dorsal nucleus. Okay, and then the third area that the limbic system uses is going to be the centromedial nucleus. Where are we going to find this guy? We're going to find him in our little peace sign, in our thing that divides it, right? And that's known as the internal medullary lamina. Not too bad. Okay, now, if we talk about the sensory one, right? We should talk about sensory and motor together, right? Because this is crazy how it is. All of the nuclei in the for sensory control and motor control are going to be in right here, this region. This is going to be known as the lateral nuclear group. Okay, so literally almost every single one of them are in this region. Now, with this region, right, I could split it kind of in half. We're going to have a ventral part or anterior part and a dorsal part, a posterior part. Fine. Now, I'm going to work from the most like high up to down, right? Anterior to posterior, I should say, when I'm writing the structures down. Okay, what does this mean? So now the first structure, right? What are we going to have? It's going to be VA, right? And it's going to be the ventral anterior nucleus. Okay, so this ventral anterior nucleus is going to be used for motor control of the thalamus. Okay, so he's going to be a motor nuclei. Right below him is going to be the ventral lateral nucleus. Okay, so ventral anterior, ventral lateral nucleus, both of these guys are used for motor control. What did we just talk about in the last video? The basal ganglia. The basal ganglia took or sent their fibers to which nucleus? The anterior lateral, right? So the ventral anterior and the ventral lateral nucleus of the thalamus. Oh my God, so that's why motor control gets its innervation from the basal ganglia. Fine. The rest of the structures proceeding down has to be sensory now. Fine. The first one, in red, I have the ventral posterior lateral. He's going to be for sensory control. The next one, brown, right? More posterior and a little medial now. He's going to be the ventral posterior medial. Okay, so ventral posterior lateral is more lateral to the ventral posterior medial. Makes sense. Below that is this green one, right? This is going to be called the pulvinar. The pulvinar nucleus is going to be right here. He's going to be in his own section. The pulvinar nucleus is in his own section. Remember I said ventral and posterior, or ventral and dorsal, also known as anterior and posterior? Okay, pulvinar is in his own section. Good. Now you said, or you could ask, Joe, I thought you said all of the sensory and motor were in this lateral nuclear group. Did you lie? Kind of. Two of these structures, right, are outside of the thalamus. They're just connected to it. Those two structures are not too hard. They're the lateral geniculate nucleus and the medial geniculate nucleus. The medial one's on the medial side of the thalamus. The lateral one's on the lateral side of the thalamus. Really not too hard. These structures are not bad at all. So now, what do we say here? Or what do we know? We know the whole anatomy, right, of what we need to know for this video. We also know where all the different regions are coming from, or all the different nucleuses are coming from. Why did I mention all these nucleuses? Okay, so here's the crazy part. Every single one of these nucleuses has a different function that we're going to talk about. I'm going to break it down very slowly. It's not going to be too bad. But just remember, here's the thalamus, left and right. Same exact thing, the thalamus is blown up. All those structures fit in here. And now all of these structures are going to either come from other areas of the brain or areas of the brainstem, the pons, the medulla, etc., the spinal cord, and they're going to target different regions, right? They can target the hippocampus, they can target the cingulate gyrus, they're going to target our primary motor cortex, right? We're going to target our prefrontal cortex, our occipital lobe. Don't worry, we're going to get through it real quick, and I'm going to break them down one by one. Okay, so the first ones we're going to talk about is going to be the limbic thalamic nucleus, so everything for the limbic system. What did we say the limbic system was? It controls fear and emotion, feeding, sexual behavior, learning, specifically memory consolidation. Now, 3 different branches. We have the anterior lateral nucleus, we have the medial dorsal nucleus, and we have the centromedial nucleus. If you guys don't remember where they were, I'll show you real quick. Where? This little board we have here, we're going to erase that. Okay, so if I draw one thalamus, right? I'll draw it like this. Now, just erase all that. You don't need to see that. Okay, so this is the anterior part. This is the medial. This is the lateral. This is the posterior. We have that peace sign, right? Okay, so the anterior part is going to be the first one. This is going to be our anterior lateral nucleus. Below him, right, or to the left of him kind of and posterior is going to be our medial dorsal nucleus. So medial because it's medial, and then dorsal because it's a little bit posterior. So our medial dorsal nucleus. And then the last one, the Centromedial Nucleus, right? He was where? Right in the middle of our peace sign, right there, inside of the internal medullary lamina. Good. Now, the first one we're going to talk about is going to be our anterior lateral nucleus. Why does this make sense? Well, these are the most anterior, and I'm just going to proceed downhill. So, for the limbic thalamic nucleus, right, we said we have memory and consolidation, right, used for learning. Well, that's what this system's going to do. This system is going to do that control. Okay, so how is this anterior lateral nucleus going to work? So, all he really is called Pape's circuit. Pons, I don't know however you want to pronounce it. And he's used for emotional episodic memory. Okay, I just said it's used for learning and memory consolidation, particularly emotional episodic memory. Fine. If we have damage to this circuit, right? I'm going to go over the circuit real quick. But if we have damage to the circuit, we could lead to Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, or Korsakoff syndrome. Remember Korsakoff's was vitamin B1 deficiency, usually in alcoholics. That's what we talked about in biochem, but it's fine. We'll stick to this right now. Now, the top region we said was called the Cingulate Gyrus. So I'm just going to write CG for the Cingulate Gyrus. Below him was the corpus callosum, so I'm just going to write CC. Okay, this is the thalamus, we know that. This was our mammillary body, so MB. This was our hippocampus for H. And then this was our entorhinal cortex, ENC. Ento, E-N-T-O, rhinal, R-I-N-A-L, and then cortex. I don't know, I just had trouble spelling it when I was learning it, so just wanted to throw it out there. Now, what region are we talking about in particular? The anterior part, right? So this anterior region of the thalamus. So what happens? Okay, the hippocampus, right, he responds to many different like chemicals like serotonin, dopamine, different neurotransmitters, right? And what are these neurotransmitters doing? They're trying to help establish our memory. Now, this whole entire circuit, right, sends the regions to like different areas. So it's like our computer, right? Our computer has a hard drive, but that hard drive does not, it stores our information, but what else does it do? It sends it to a processor, right? From the processor, it could go to like a different data center, then it could be like a RAM, all these different things. So our hippocampus is going to send it through a processor, the RAM, etc. What does that mean? So the hippocampus, right, he's going to send the fiber, just follow it down, through the fornix. So this is the fornix, what I just drew, this black line, the fornix, right? So it sends it all the way down, known as the fornix, that's the tract. The fornix is going to send it into the mammillary body. Fine. The mammillary body is going to receive that signal, and he's going to send it up to our anterior thalamus. Our anterior thalamus is like, cool, thanks. Now he's like, what can I do? I can send this fiber to the Cingulate Gyrus. Okay, so he sends it to the Cingulate Gyrus. What does the Cingulate Gyrus do? He's like, all right, I don't really know what I could do now. I need some help. I'm going to send you to the entorhinal nucleus. Okay, so the cortex, I apologize. Now, from the entorhinal cortex, he sends it right back into the hippocampus. So now this is our circuit, known as Pape's circuit, right? Or Pape's circuit. What does this do? It's just helping to send everything to different regions of the brain. For what? Just so we have better memory consolidation and helping to form our emotional episodic memory. Good. So our limbic thalamic nucleus, the anterior lateral nucleus in particular, that's the Pape's tract. Now, the medial dorsal nucleus, right? Not too bad. Where's he going to be located? Let's take our little structure real quick. Here's our thalamus, anterior thalamus, medial dorsal nucleus. What is this? The lateral nuclear group. Over here we had our two different regions. What were they? Lateral genicular nucleus, middle genicular nucleus. This is our centromedial nucleus. Right here is what we're talking about. Our medial dorsal nucleus. Now, what is he going to be used for? Okay, he's going to receive information from 3 different areas. Now, when he receives this information, he's going to send it, or this information is going to come to this region, and he's going to send it to our prefrontal cortex. Why our prefrontal cortex? Okay, so this is also involved in memory. It's also the emotional aspect of memory. Now, what is the prefrontal cortex used for? Okay, he's used for our abstract thinking. So abstract thinking and emotional memory. Good. He helps if there's damage to this prefrontal cortex or to this tract, right? We're going to lose motivation, we're going to lose drive, and we're going to have a syndrome known as Korsakoff's, also known as our B1 deficiency with alcoholics. Now, real quick, this is our brainstem. What is this guy right there? Medulla, Pons, midbrain. Couldn't really draw it too well, but that's fine. Now, this region right here, we said it was the pituitary gland. However, we're going to get innervation from 3 different inputs, right? 3 different inputs to our medial dorsal nucleus. First one, this blue guy, remember what he was? This was our sorry for blocking the screen, hypothalamus. Okay, so the hypothalamus is going to send it up into our medial dorsal nucleus. What else? This green guy, we said it was the olfactory. So the olfactory cortex. Okay, so the olfactory cortex is going to also send supply here. Good. One other one. This one right here, the amygdala. What was the amygdala used for? The amygdala is used for what? Fear and aggression. Okay, so now, 1, 2, and 3. It's any particular order, it doesn't matter. But the hypothalamus, the amygdala, and the olfactory cortex send their supply to this medial dorsal nucleus, right? This is the input. Now the output is going to go to our prefrontal cortex. Okay, so they're sending their supply to the medial dorsal nucleus into the prefrontal cortex to help with abstract thinking. Cool. Not too bad. So now we cover the anterior lateral nucleus, the medial dorsal nucleus. We got to cover one more, the central nucleus. Fine. Now, the last one is the centromedial nucleus. Where is he going to be? Well, here's our thalamus, right? The P sign, he's right in the middle, in the intralaminar, right? Intralaminar nuclei. We have a couple types of intralaminar nuclei, but we're mainly going to focus on which one? Mainly going to focus on the centromedial nucleus. Now, what does he do? Okay, he receives information for slow pain. Okay, so from the pain pathway. What pathway was that? That's known as the spinal thalamic tract. What type of fibers did the spinal thalamic tract use? Well, they used C fibers. Okay, so all this guy does, right? He receives information from slow pain pathway, known as the spinal thalamic tract, and he uses C fibers to do it. Now, you see you're here, right? I wrote parafascicular nucleus. That's just another nucleus in the peace sign, right? But we're not worrying about him. All we're concerned about is the main one, centromedial nucleus. Now, as you can see, we're going to start off over here. Remember the the spinal tract videos I made. Okay, so this is the spinal thalamic tract. We have pain, right? It's going to receive innervation from C fibers. These C fibers are going to travel through the posterior right horn. Now, they're going to proceed where? They're going to contralaterally cross over into the anterior or lateral white column, and they're going to proceed upwards. When they ascend upwards, they're going to be known as the spinal lemniscus. Okay, the spinal lemniscus is going to do what? He's just sending the fibers up, and some of the fibers, right, they're going to go to the reticular formation. What fibers go to the reticular formation? Those are the spino-reticular fibers. Fine, makes sense. The rest of the fibers are going to shoot up into the what? Centromedial nucleus. Also, some of the fibers that come from the reticular formation, they're also going to go into the centromedial nucleus. Fine. After the centromedial nucleus, they're going to ascend upwards. When they ascend upwards, they're going to go to another region. What region is this? They're going to go to the cortical, like the cortex areas. What part of the cortex? It's mainly sending the information to the centromedial nucleus, which we said, and it's going to send it to non-specific cortical areas. Some of those non-specific cortical areas is going to be the cingulate gyrus. Why would it be the cingulate gyrus? Well, didn't we just speak about, real quick, I know this is annoying, but didn't we say we have the cingulate gyrus over here, and then we have the hippocampus. The hippocampus is going to go through the fornix, and he's going to send information to what? Mammillary body, which is then going to send information where? He's going to send information to another region. What was this region called? Main one. Thalamus. From the thalamus, the information went cingulate gyrus. Cingulate gyrus, send it down to that entorhinal nuclei or cortex. Entorhinal cortex goes to the hippocampus. So now, if we have supply coming, right, from the pain receptors to the cingulate gyrus, it's going to help us with our emotional aspect of pain. Because pain, right, sometimes make us what? Emotional. We could cry from it. So good. The non-specific cortical areas is the cingulate gyrus. It takes pain and it sends it to what? The limbic system, which was what we just spoke about, one of the papa's tract. And that's basically it. Like, that's how we get emotional pain. Like, that's how we consolidate it into our memory. Okay, so that's everything we need to know about the limbic system. We will move on to the sensory system now. Now, we're covering the sensory thalamic nucleus. What did we have in here? We had the lateral geniculate nucleus, right? We had the medial genicular, or geniculate, I'm sorry. Geniculate nucleus. All right, geniculate. What else did we have? Okay, we had a ventral posterior. The ventral posterior nucleus, right? Ventral posterior lateral, I'm sorry. We had a ventral posterior medial. And then which one am I missing? The pulvinar. Okay, so now where are these guys? So remember, this is the lateral geniculate nucleus. This is the medial geniculate nucleus. This whole region was the pulvinar, right? Now, we had a ventral anterior nucleus, right? What else did we have? We had a ventral anterior and we had a ventral lateral. Now, we had a ventral, a ventral posterior lateral and a ventral posterior medial. So this is a ventral posterior lateral, ventral posterior medial. Now, what are we going to start? This is going to be our number one. We're going to start here, lateral geniculate nucleus. Okay, here we go. Lateral geniculate nucleus, right? Okay, L for light, light for vision. What does that mean? This is the visual pathway. The lateral geniculate nucleus is going to be used for the visual pathway. What does this mean? Well, the L in lateral is going to be used just the letter L, and L is light, light is vision, right? That's just how I'm remembering it. You don't have to, you can do whatever the hell you want, but helps me. So how does this start? So this is our structure, right? This is the thalamus. What are we targeting? Right here, our lateral geniculate nucleus. This is the anterior part, right? This is the medial dorsal, and etc. Now, what can we do? So, the visual stimulus, right? It comes in, say it's like a flashlight. Okay, flashlight shoots through, right? Shoots through the eye. What part of the eye? Well, it's going to go through the cornea, right? We said the cornea was like the little area in the front. Then behind that, you have the lens. So it's going to pass through the cornea, pass through the lens, and it's going to redirect, and it's going to hit the retina. Okay, hits the retina. If it hits the retina, it can hit the rods, the cones, etc. It depends if we're seeing for color or black and white. Now, from the retina, it's going to travel down through the optic nerve. Okay, that's what I have in orange. From the optic nerve, it's going to travel through the optic tract. Remember, real quick, I'm going to draw another tract right there, like another nerve with the eyeball. Not too good though. And the fibers come through. They cross over, remember? If they're coming from different sides, if it's coming from the lateral side, it's going to stay. But if it's coming from the nasal part, the medial part, it's going to cross through the optic chiasm. So the lateral side is the temporal side. Medial part is the nasal side. They cross in the optic chiasm. So some fibers are going to cross through the optic chiasm, whatever. When they cross, or if they don't cross, they're going to continue down through the optic tract. Cool. From the optic tract, we're going to hit what? This is our lateral geniculate nucleus. Nice. When we hit the lateral geniculate nucleus, right? Literally attached to the thalamus. He's going to send some fibers to the midbrain. So he's going to send some fibers to the midbrain. Or he's going to do what? He's going to send these fibers where? To the occipital lobe. Particularly the primary visual cortex, also known as the striate cortex, or Brodmann area number 17. I think the main thing that we should focus on is that it's going to the primary visual cortex of the occipital lobe. That's the most important thing. But you gotta know it all if you want. So what is this used for? It's used for perceptions of what? A visual stimulus. Okay, so if we could perceive, the visual stimulus coming in, we know what's going to happen. Now, why did I say some structures could come to the midbrain? Okay, the midbrain, we have different regions. We have the superior colliculus, right? The superior colliculus does different things as well. It helps us with reflexes. So like someone's walking past us, right? And we notice them. Our eyes move, like our head moves, like we twitch. Not even twitch, but like we look quick. So our eyes look quick to see the person walking. This is going to come from our midbrain area. Cool. Now, next pathway I want to talk about is going to be the medial geniculate nucleus. Not too bad. What did I say? We have the medial geniculate nucleus, right? Real quick, where's he going to be located? Anterior, medial. This is our lateral group, or lateral nucleus group. Lateral geniculate nucleus, medial geniculate nucleus. Fine. Okay, here we go. We're going to think M for music. M for music, so it's for what? Hearing. So it's our auditory pathway. Now, how is this track going to go? Not too bad. Not too bad at all. We're going to mainly target, or we're going to get our information from the ears, right? So this is 2 ears. I don't know. I drew them like that. And we're going to have the vestibulocochlear nerve. What cranial nerve is that? It's cranial nerve 8. He's going to travel down, right? Both of them. We're just going to write both of them for one reason. So they're going to travel down, right? And they're going to cross. When they cross at where? The Pons Medulla Junction, if we remember that from one of our videos. I think it was the first video I made about the medulla. We said the most superior part was the Pons Medulla Junction. So when they cross, right, they're going to form something in the Pons region, however. Now we're in the Pons region. When we're in the Pons region, we're in the inferior part of the Pons, and it's going to form the trapezoid body. Okay, so now we form the trapezoid body. What happens? Trapezoid body, that's all it does, right? That's what it forms. These fibers are going to continue traveling up. What fibers are these? Well, there was the vestibulocochlear nerve. They're going to travel up and they're going to form into the lateral, what? Lateral lemniscus. From the lateral lemniscus, they're going to target another region. Okay, what region is this? It's our inferior colliculus. We just mentioned superior colliculus was for the vision. Inferior colliculus is for what? Hearing. So it's going to target the inferior colliculus. Then, what's it going to do? The inferior colliculus is going to send fibers up to the, oh, you know it, medial geniculate nucleus. So this guy makes so much sense. And then these fibers are going to go out to the temporal lobe, right? He's going to send it to the temporal lobe. We should know the primary auditory cortex, or Brodmann's area. So Brodmann's area, what numbers? 41 and 42. Okay. Not as important, but just know it's going to send the information from it's going to take the information from the vestibulocochlear nerve to the inferior colliculus, from the inferior colliculus to where? Medial geniculate nucleus, from the medial geniculate nucleus to where? Primary auditory cortex. Not bad at all. We're chipping away. To the pulvinar nucleus. Where is he? Real quick. Right in this region. He has his own region to himself. And what region is this? This is in the lateral nuclear group, but in the posterior aspect, so the posterior part. Cool. Oh, sorry. Okay, he's going now. Sorry. All right, so now, this pulvinar nucleus, right, where we said he was located, right in this region, he's really taking information from both the superior colliculus and the inferior colliculus. Wait a second. Didn't I just say the medial and lateral geniculuses? The lateral and the medial geniculates send information to either the superior colliculus or the inferior colliculus, or better yet, receive information from the superior colliculus and inferior colliculus? Yes. So, how is this going to work? The superior colliculus, right, he sends information to particularly the lateral what? Geniculate nucleus. So we could draw it like this, lateral geniculate nucleus. The inferior colliculus sends his information to where? The medial geniculate nucleus. Where does this supply go now? So they could either send their information directly to this pulvinar nucleus, so either directly to it, or they send it to the lateral geniculate or medial geniculate, which then send their information into the pulvinar nucleus, this guy right here. Now, from the pulvinar nucleus, what happens? The information travels to the occipital lobe. Okay, not bad. What was another name for the occipital lobe? We said it before. Striate cortex. Cool. So, we said it was Brodmann's area number what? Brodmann's area number 17. So, 1-7. Now, for this pathway, the pulvinar nucleus, right? We're not using number 17. 17 was the primary visual cortex. We're going to use Brodmann's area 18 and 19. And this is going to be known as our visual association area. Okay, and what is it going to be used for? It's going to be used for visual processing. Of what? Past experiences, right? So it gives meaning to images. So what does this mean? So you walk down the street, right? And you see someone smiling. So if someone's smiling, you're like, this cortex or this region is going to be like, oh, they're smiling, they must be happy. Like, we know that's a facial expression that we could correlate to smiling. And how do we know that? When we were a little kid, someone's like, oh, smile if you're happy, or like frown like if you're upset, like your face just does that. And we remember these patterns throughout the past. What else could you do? So like if you see someone like being sarcastic, right, and their facial expression is being very sarcastic, you could differentiate, or you could try to differentiate if they're being genuine or if they're being just like sarcastic prick, you know? And how can you determine that? This visual association area, particularly Brodmann's area number 18 and 19, receiving the information from the inferior colliculus, superior colliculus, lateral geniculate, medial geniculate, into the pulvinar area, sends it to this region of the occipital lobe, and this is how we distinguish our what? Our visual processing from past experiences, and this is how we react. Not too shabby. Ventral posterior lateral nucleus. Okay, we just said where he was. What's he going to get information from? Alright, so unfortunately he's getting information from a couple different regions, but it's not too hard. Why? Because you guys watched or you guys learned different spinal tracts. If you know the spinal tracts, this should be a piece of cake. Okay, so we know for this pathway we're going to use two different tracts. Dorsal column medial Luminiscus pathway. Probably the one that we've harped on the most. And this was for what? Sensory info. And then we have the spinal thalamic tract. And what was this guy used for? Okay. He was used for pain and temperature and crude touch and pressure. How? Which ones? Well, we know the anterior spinal thalamic tract was crude touch and pressure. And then the lateral spinal thalamic tract was pain and temperature. Cool. Now, the dorsal column medial lemniscus pathway was what? Fine touch, proprioception, and vibration. Okay. So, first we're going to start off with the spinal thalamic tract. What does it mean? Spine to thalamus. Spino for spine, spinal cord. Thalamic, thalamus. So it's going to the thalamus. How? Not too bad. We're going to go in this blue color, right? It's just going to represent the lateral spinal thalamic tract, and we know where it goes. He comes down, right? I should do this in the same color. We got blue and we got purple. Okay, sorry. Okay, so the pain and temperature, right? This is the lateral spinal thalamic tract. He's going to travel down through the anterior great horn, cross over into what region is this? The lateral white column, and then he's going to ascend upwards. Cool. Now, I'll do this guy in purple, even though I have it in ocean blue. Crude touch and pressure are coming from where? The anterior spinal thalamic tract. He's going to pass through the posterior great horn, and now he's going to contralaterally cross over into the where? Ventral white column. He's going to ascend upwards, and they're going to join together. When they join together, what do they form? Okay, we spoke about this a lot. This column is going to travel up, right? And when he travels up, he's ascending where? He's ascending into the thalamus. Now, where does this really take place? Kind of by the medulla region. I'll explain why after. But they ascend up together, they go into the thalamus. What part? The ventral posterior lateral nucleus of the thalamus in particular. Okay. Now, the thalamus then sends fibers into the cortex. What part? The cerebral cortex, the primary somatosensory cortex in particular. also known as Brodmann's area 3, 1, and 2. Okay. Now, the next one, right? The dorsal column medial lemniscus pathway. What did we say? Where? Let me harp on him again. Where is this guy? Well, we got down Broadway, right? We got 1, 2, 1, 2. Fasciculus cuneatus, fasciculus gracilis, medial, correct? Now, they take fine touch, proprioception, and vibration. These fibers travel into the where? Anterior white column, or the dorsal white column. The dorsal white column, they travel into the dorsal white column and travel upward. Now, it depends what side they come from, or if it's coming from the upper body or the lower body. But, real quick, if it's coming from the lower body, it's going to where? Nucleus gracilis. If it's coming from the upper body, it's going where? Nucleus cuneatus, over here, whatever. These fibers then cross over and join together. Contralaterally cross over, they ascend upwards. When they ascend upwards, what are they going to go to? They're going to go to the ventral posterior lateral nucleus, which is then going to go to the cortex, cerebral cortex. And they're going to go to where? Mainly the primary somatosensory cortex, Brodmann's area 3, 1, and 2. Cool. One more pathway for sensory, and then we're done. Ventral posterior medial nucleus. I just realized I've cut this part out in the last one. I'm sorry. We'll do it real quick. We have the ventral anterior, ventral lateral, ventral posterior lateral, ventral posterior medial, lateral geniculate nucleus, medial geniculate nucleus, right? We covered him, covered the fovo one, right? The pulvinar nucleus, and now we covered, these two are for motor. Ventral posterior lateral we just covered. Now we have the ventral posterior medial. Cool. Where is he coming from? Well, he's just medial to the lateral one. And he's going to also come from but like a few other things. But they're going to end up, the key thing is that it's going to end up as the same exact place, or at the same exact place as the lateral one. What's that ending? Primary somatosensory tract, Brodmann's area 3, 1, and 2. Fine. Now, it's going to come through two things. It's going to be the trigeminal thalamic tract or gustation, so different cranial nerves. Now, let's start off real quick. This is the thalamus, right? These are going to be 3 different regions. What are these 3 different regions going to be? These different 3 regions are going to be where the trigeminal tract goes. Now, we know for the medulla, right? In the medulla region, we have the spinal nucleus. In the pons region, we have the pontine. And then in the midbrain region, we have the mesencephalic. Fine. The trigeminal thalamic tract, I've spoke about him a lot in other videos. But he's going to take sensations, right, from the face, primarily the face, and he's for pain, temperature, proprioception, and vibration. So these sensations are going to travel through the trigeminal nerve. At the trigeminal nerve, they're going to form into the trigeminal tract. Then they're going to target different regions, and these fibers are going to ascend up. When they ascend up, they're going to go to the ventral posterior medial nucleus. These fibers are then going to go to the cortex. Which one? The primary somatosensory tract. Primary somatosensory cortex. I don't know why I wrote tract. Also known as Brodmann's 3, 1, and 2. Now, for gustation, right? This is for taste. You have cranial nerve 7, which is your facial nerve. It's mainly the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. Cranial nerve 9, glossopharyngeal, posterior 1/3 of the tongue for taste. Cranial nerve 10, the vagus nerve, right? It's like the epiglottis and stuff. Now, these fibers are going to travel and they're going to go to the nucleus tractus of solitarius. Or nucleus of tractus solitarius. Wow, tongue twister. Now, these fibers then travel up through the central tegmental tract. This tract is then going to travel into the ventral posterior medial nucleus. From here, these fibers are going to ascend into the primary somatosensory cortex, also known as Brodmann's 3, 1, or 2. Now, this is all the sensory stuff we need to cover for the thalamus. 2 more ones, the motor ones, and then we're done. And now if we just keep on keeping on, the motor thalamic nucleus, right? There's 2 parts. We have the ventral anterior nucleus and then the ventral lateral nucleus. Okay, I blew this up, right? I blew it up. You see it small, like this is our little spinal cord, this is our medulla, our pons, our midbrain, right? Whatever. Now, This is the blown up view. I'm just going to do one side because that's what I've been doing this whole time. Now, our main goal is to get to the premotor cortex. Okay, for Brodmann's area 6, same thing. Now, what does this look like? We just filmed a video on the basal ganglia. I'm not going into it in detail right now. It's just not worth it, like too much time. But real quick, we can send my fibers down, right? Say we're doing the direct pathway, right? The direct pathway. Fibers come down into this region and this region. What are they? Cardiac nucleus and the putamen, right? Also known as the striatum. Cool. These fibers then go into where? Direct pathway, remember? These fibers go into the globus pallidus internus. Alright, bet. From these fibers, they travel into the thalamus. What region? Ventral anterior nucleus. Makes sense. Now, this nucleus can send fibers up to the premotor cortex. The premotor cortex can then initiate what? Motor movement. Activity, right? Cool, whatever. Now, the indirect pathway, right? Tone down unwanted movements. The direct pathway is to what? Start wanted movements. Cool. Now, same thing. Fibers come down into the cardiac nucleus or the putamen, also known as the striatum. First, the fibers go into the, what region is this? Globus pallidus externus. Cool. The fibers are going to travel down into what? Subthalamus. From the subthalamus, they're going to go into where? Globus pallidus internus. From the internus, we're going to go into where? Ventral anterior nucleus. Same thing. Into the premotor cortex or Brodmann's area 6. And what is this for? The indirect pathway. So we'll do D for direct, I for indirect. Inhibit unwanted movements. Fire. Movement. Cool. Now, what else you have? The Substantia Niagara. What does he do? Alright, well, he could send information to both the putamen, the cardiac nucleus or the putamen. For the direct pathway, he stimulates what? D1 receptors by releasing dopamine. And they're going to what? Increase what? Our motor movement. Now, if it's the indirect pathway, we're going to do D2 receptors, which are what? Inhibitory. And this is going to be for the indirect pathway, so they're going to do what? Help assist in the modulation of our unwanted movement. Fine. Not bad. That's everything you need to know for this motor thalamic nucleus. Particularly, not the whole thing, for the ventral anterior nucleus. That's all you need to know. Cool. Now, the last one, ventral lateral. Part now, ventral lateral nucleus. Not easy. Last part, sorry. Okay, what does he do? His end goal is to send information where? To our same exact region of that primary motor cortex. Okay, so instead of the premotor cortex, we're going to the primary motor cortex. What area is this? Brodmann's area 4. Fine, not bad. Okay, how is he going to do this? Same thing. One way, the fibers can come down, travel through the putamen, into our globus pallidus, up, and they could stimulate where? The ventral lateral nucleus. This is from the basal ganglia. So we said the basal ganglia could stimulate what? It could stimulate the anterior lateral nucleus or the ventral anterior nucleus or the ventral lateral nucleus. That's how it does it. Now, it sends information to the premotor cortex, which is Brodmann's area 6, or to the primary motor cortex, which is Brodmann's area 4. Fine. Now, what else can this pathway be used for? Okay, so these fibers could also be sent down, pass through the basal ganglia, right? Like, don't go through it. Comes out and stimulates something. Okay, it's going to stimulate the dentate nucleus. What is this guy? He's in the cerebellum. What was the cerebellum used for? Proprioception. Where does proprioception come from, right? Like, how is the cerebellum know proprioception? There's so many different tracts that send signals through where? Inferior cerebellar peduncles, middle cerebellar peduncles, superior cerebellar peduncles, right? All those peduncles getting fibers from ascending tracts particular, sending information to the cerebellum. Now, the dentate nucleus, right? It receives innervation for our motor plan from where? The cortex. Cool. Dentate nucleus is like, oh, bet. I already know all the different proprioceptions from all of my ascending tracts. my ascending family helped me out. He's like, this is what I gotta do. So the dentate nucleus is gonna then send fibers to either the red nucleus right here, and then from the red nucleus you go up to the thalamus, or directly to the thalamus, right? And they're targeting the ventral lateral nucleus. Decent. From the ventral lateral nucleus, these fibers are sending up and they're targeting the primary motor cortex, also known as Brodmann's area 4. What is this guy used for? He's mainly used for coordination of motor movement, modulation of motor movement, and planning and initiating. That's it, guys. That's everything we need to know about the thalamus. I hope these videos helped, and yeah.